Um, I guess maybe a little bit of background first. I first met Jules, I believe it was at the Cedar City ICUP in like 2019. I don't know if you remember that, but
Uh,
he
I
me
remember
at
that, but
second.
I think we actually met before at the cycross race
Oh, really?
where I let you borrow my
Oh,
bike.
that's right. I used your
Uh,
bike.
and it
Yes.
was 5 minutes before the start of your race, and we're trying to scramble and get the
Yep.
seat post height correct
Oh,
and
you're
everything.
right. Good memory. Yeah, that was exciting. So that would have been in 2018 because it was cyclocross state champs my
Yeah.
senior year. Yeah. Okay. That is awesome. Yep. So yeah, that good times. But we really haven't like spent too much time together. Mostly just those two quick little things. Uh,
No, yeah, because we kind of met, and then you kind of left for your mission soon afterwards. And I guess you've been back for maybe a year or so now. So
yeah, a little over a year. Exactly.
um, yeah, we just haven't had a ton of overlap.
Yeah, yeah. So this will be good. Catch up a little bit. Um, Maybe to start, could you just tell us your story, kind of, because you're from France, is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe tell us just from the get-go to where you are now.
Yeah. I guess yeah, kind of long story short, my families were all from France, from the south of France, and that's where I was born. And we moved to the US kind of in the late 90s. I was around 6 years old for my dad's work at the time. He's an engineer, and it's kind of started the tech boom back in the Silicon Valley. So we all moved out there. Grew up in a very much French household because my mom didn't really speak English, and we went to French American schools growing up. Um, would go back to France in the summers to visit grandparents, family in general, and that's almost the first time I saw bike racing was during the summer going to my grandparents' houses and seeing they would bring us to the Tour de France. They would just bring us to the side of the road. In retrospect, like the worst possible spot to watch the tour would be like a downhill turn. We'd see them in like 3 seconds and that was it. But we didn't know any better, and we thought it was awesome to see the caravans and just, all the advertisements, all the colorful peloton. But that was kind of my only like concept of bike racing. For me, bike racing was Tour de France. Like I didn't even realize there was such a thing as amateur bike racing, as silly as that sounds now. It just seemed like this thing that would be impossible to get into. So I never really thought much of it. Played soccer through high school. Went to college on the East Coast in New England, in Rhode Island. Um, and that's actually where I started. Well, that's where I kind of got introduced to endurance sports. Joined the cycling team there. Good group of small guys and girls there, and that was just super fun. Did the collegiate cycling road scene there. Traveled all over in New England with the school team. Super fun. And then that second year so my sophomore year in college is kind of when I started taking it a little bit more seriously and actually training and seeing really big improvements right away. So that's always motivating. Um, and then kind of kept that while I was getting my degree in product design. And then my senior year of college, I got third at collegiate nationals on the road, and then joined a U23 road team that was based on the East Coast, CCB, and we that was awesome because it was a lot of other U23 uh, racers like me, and we got to travel. That were all very like motivated and ambitious, and also all of us had kind of what we had in common was a bit of a late start to the sport. Kind of a lot of us kind of started in college, so that team was kind of an opportunity for you know in cycling terms, kind of like late bloomers to give us an opportunity, and we got to race in Belgium, in Europe, in France, and then we even went to Asia. Did a 2 week long stage race there, which was crazy on the road. That was after I had graduated, so at that point I had no real plans of what I was going to do.
Yeah.
Uh, Ended up in China, did a tour of China, and then I joined a continental pro team out there. for the rest of that fall season. Still with like no real plan of what I was gonna do. But you know, it was really cool because in Asia there's actually like quite a bit of prize money, so it's actually a lot more feasible to try and to make some sort of living or at least scrape by.
Yeah.
So I did that, and then raced in China, raced in Malaysia, raced in Taiwan, and then eventually I started getting a little homesick. And then the winter was coming, off season. I was like, I don't at this point, I don't really have any plans. So I went back home to California, joined a domestic team there on the road, raced for a year, but then realized it was just like not the same thing. You know, you have to travel so far in the US to do these races, and there's not much money, there's not many spectators. It was just a different experience. And then I got my job opportunity to come out here to Utah. And at that point, I was basically living on a suitcase. So I figured Utah sounds great. You know, let's go check it out. Uh, Tried to still race on the road once I got here, but then that's when I really fell in love with mountain biking. And I was like, I don't want to ride on the roads when there's these mountains right there. Want to get away from the cars, kind of be on the trail was just made me much happier. So kind of started transitioning to endurance mountain bike racing. That's what I've been doing now for maybe the last yeah, I guess like 6 years.
Okay. That's sweet. And when did you start skimo racing?
So I've alpine skied kind of growing up, you know. But you know, maybe we'd do like a winter vacation and ski for like a week. So it was never like I would ski like full winter or anything like that. And then I didn't really start skiing again consistently until I moved here 6 years ago, and I actually started cross country skiing at Norfolk. Uh, they do the Ogden Nordic that has a great they have great facilities, and they groom their trails almost every day, and there's
Well,
super fun, super awesome. Like most things, I get like really into it, and I want to like learn as much as I can, and I get really motivated when I see progress. So I just started skiing a ton during the winter, just as like cross training. Signed up for my like a 50K ski race, and was yeah, was just living it. But unfortunately, my enthusiasm was did not match my skill level, and started developing a bit of a tendon issue on my left leg. So I actually from the like skating motion. So I had to stop doing that, and I was kind of bummed out because I was really enjoying that. And a friend of mine introduced me to Skimo, and I had never heard about it or even really knew what backcountry skiing was. But I tried it out, and like the vertical motion of my ankle didn't irritate my tendon, so I was like, oh cool, maybe I'll try this. The first year I just bought like no, so I would say that was probably like 3 years ago. The first year I had no idea what Skimo was. So I just bought like total, just run KSL and like got backcountry gear. Had no idea what to look for and any of that sort of stuff. But one of my coworkers at the time took me to the Snow Basin uphill route in the morning, and I was like, this is awesome. So and that was around the end of the winter. So the next season I bought a used set of Skimo race gear, and then I just got really into it.
Sweet. And now you're on Team USA for skimo, correct?
Correct. Yes. Last year was my first year with them, and then I qualified again for next year, so this will be my second season with the national team, which is always exciting.
That's super cool. So, is your focus now primarily on skiing or biking, or is it kind of both? What tell us about that a little bit?
It's a good question, and it's definitely something I think about a lot. Um, I feel like um, I'm really happy with what I've been able to achieve in my like cycling, career, if you will. I have great sponsors. I've had great support the last 5 years. Um, been able to race all over kind of Utah, Colorado, in the US in general. And the last 2 years I've been able to do the marathon world championships, and that was always kind of a big goal for me. But for me, that was kind of like the pinnacle of the sport, you know. I felt like I had done it and then I had done it again, and I really enjoyed, but it was almost, I know that that was almost my I had almost reached my potential, because I know I'm not going to win world championships or be top 5 or top 10. The best I can do is try to, you know, marginally improve my results, or try and like stay consistent year over year. Uh, and you know, to be honest, it's just, that's just not as exciting anymore compared to when you have this new sport where you're seeing so much progress so quickly, like, and you're just learning so much with Skimo. Like for me, that it just, it got way more exciting, you know, and in terms of effort you put into the reward you get out of it, I'm just seeing a lot more return with my time invested in Skimo versus cycling. So I think right now, I think last year was the first year I kind of really took both, or Skimo seriously, almost to the same level as mountain biking. And I feel like the tides are changing a little bit, and then next year Skimo will be maybe the priority, and then cycling will be um, to stay busy in the summer, to stay fit, to train for the Skimo season, still do some high level races, but it won't be my, you know, number one goal and pursue.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, that's super interesting. So you maybe let's kind of jump back to when you were racing in Asia. Um,
Sure.
I'm curious, what was that like traveling as a team? Where would you guys stay? Like, I don't know, walk me through kind of a stage race in Asia.
Gosh, yeah, it was wild. It's really cool because in Asia, and I guess in like in China in particular, the races are government funded, and they usually are, they pull money from their like sports tourism budget.
Cool.
Which actually makes a lot of sense. So basically each town that hosts the race, like they're trying to show off their village or their city or their nicest hotels and whatnot. So they basically pay for everything, and we were staying in these like 5-star hotels.
No way.
You get shuttled around in buses. Sometimes it was like 6-hour bus rides through the countryside in China, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Stop at these gas stations and trying to scramble through the gas station to find some sort of snack that for the rest of the ride. Yeah, it was really cool. I mean, it was really I feel pretty lucky and privileged that I've been pretty well traveled before that experience. So it wasn't really overwhelming in a sense where uh, I'm excited to try new foods. I'm excited to not be super comfortable in an environment. You know, like I actually embrace that sort of situation where a lot of other foreigners we were racing with, they were trying to be very like strict about keeping, almost mimicking the same sort of bubble they would have in Europe in
Uh,
terms of getting ready for races and going to bed at a certain time, eating a certain type of food, having their pre-race routines, where that once you're in Asia, that all that goes out the window. Yeah. And I like that. And I like that sort of being able to manage that stress and chaos, and seeing who kind of comes up on top.
Interesting. Uh, so you kind of have to just roll with the way they do it out there.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Which, you know, it's part of the experience, it's part of the fun. But I think racing in Asia definitely was a big eye opener for me in terms of what was possible in terms of like road racing career, I guess, because as I just mentioned, like for me, all that was like, you know, it was fun. It was like it was a cool experience. But I would see, especially like Eastern European teams that were there, and they were not trying to have fun. They were there to like do a job.
Yeah.
And that's kind of when I realized, like, man, I you know, I befriended a few of them during, because we were racing for 2 weeks and kind of going to the same hotels and stuff. And a lot of them, it was like, yeah, they have a wife and kid back home, and the family business is like working at a farm, you know? So it's like either they can try and cut it as a cyclist doing all these races around Asia and make some money, or it's go back to the farm back home and live a pretty simple life. So that kind of made me realize, like, wow, there's a big difference between a lot of American cyclists who pursue a professional career almost from a hobby perspective, more so than people who pursue it as like an actual source of income, you know?
Yeah.
And it's quite different. And not to get like too into it, but that also made me almost realize how I could almost understand why these people would take much bigger risks, whether that's um, physical risk descending and whatnot, or risk with performance enhancing drugs. Because for them, it was like if something happens, whatever, they retire, they leave the sport, they've made some money, and that's that. You know,
Uh,
not saying that it's okay by any means, but it made me realize like, okay, I it's a different perspective than what we hear back home, where for us it's kind of a fun hobby, you know.
sure. Like they actually are, they need the money.
Right, right,
Huh. That is really interesting. Yeah, no, it definitely does seem like all of the pros I've talked to and the people around here seem they definitely got into it initially for fun.
right,
You know, it wasn't like I need a job, I'm gonna go be a pro cyclist. I don't think
right.
that ever goes through people's minds here.
Which you know we're very fortunate to that that's the case, that we can enjoy these hobbies where, yeah, for a lot of people they don't really have much of an option.
Yeah, totally. That's super crazy. Do you have any like crazy stories from your or from Asia? Anything wild that happened while you were there?
Oh man, I got the like most sick I've ever been, I think. We did a full stage and it was pouring rain in the countryside, you know, like basically cow, you know, poop on the roads, and it's raining, all that's getting like flicked in your face.
Ooh.
And uh that after like a couple days in a row, I was just floored and I was so sick. Uh and I couldn't really even speak to the doctors there. Like I didn't really know what was going on. It was a real struggle to just get through the race at that point. But yeah, I've seen some awesome landscape, racing through like tea fields almost, racing mountaintop finishes to this temple in the middle of like a bamboo forest. It's like just super cool.
Oh, that's crazy. Yeah. It sounds like so you race several stage races then out there in Asia, you were saying.
Yeah.
You have a I guess maybe this is let's maybe do two. Do you have a favorite like all-time road race and then after an all-time mountain bike race?
Like anywhere in the world?
Yeah.
Hmm, that's a tricky question. I would say my all-time favorite road race. I think I would have to say like the one that I have the best memories or strongest memories was probably collegiate nationals when I finished on the podium, because result aside, that was on the Richmond course, and we were used as a test event for the World Championships that was going to happen a year later.
Oh wow. That's
So it was like downtown Richmond, super legit. Like roads closed, we had full like police escorts. It was just like it was almost the first time where I did a race as a collegiate athlete where I felt like we were treated like a pro peloton, you know.
yeah, yeah, totally.
So that experience is really cool, and obviously be able to have good legs and have a good race then, that was just kind of the cherry on top. So I think I have really good memories of that. Um, Favorite mountain bike race? Oh boy. Uh, hmm. Part of me wants to say Paris Hole in Grand Targhee.
Okay.
I love that it's basically like 90% single track.
Wow.
Uh, I love that area. 100. It was when I did it. It was 100 miles. I think now they do like 100K.
Okay.
Um, But I think another one that I always feel like unfinished business in a way is Leadville for sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Even though I don't necessarily like the terrain, the course itself, I think the altitude factor and sort of the fact that it's one of the biggest races in the U.S. At this point, the media factor and everything, it just makes it like really hard. I've never been able to really get all the pieces together to have the race I wanted, and yeah, it feels like I have unfinished business there.
How many times have you raced Leadville?
I must have done it like maybe like 4 or 5 times now. It was actually like my first ever mountain bike race was Leadville,
Oh,
basically. Yeah.
nice.
I had no
Awesome.
idea what I was doing. I had done the Tahoe Trail as a qualifier for it, and borrowed a friend's bike that was basically like a downhill bike, like dual crown fork,
My,
super heavy bike, and it was just like a climby 60-mile course, and that's where I got my like ticket for Leadville that same year, and I went there and had to kind of scramble a bike, buy a cheap bike on Craigslist, and didn't know anything about. I think I even like I had tubes in. I didn't know anything about tire
oh,
pressure. I didn't know anything about gearing. I didn't know anything about altitude, and I distinctly remember like getting to the main climb in Columbine, and Rebecca Rush that year was not racing the front of the race. She was kind of racing with a friend, kind of showing her friend the ropes of Leadville, and I had linked up. I was like on Rebecca's wheel, the base of Columbine, and I was so concentrated to try and just not let that wheel go. Eventually blew up and limped my way back home the next 50 miles.
that's rough. So what was that first bike you did it on? Do you remember?
Like the dual crown one, like the
I
downhill one.
guess yeah, that one and the first bike you bought on Craigslist.
The first bike I bought on Craigslist was this like carbon hardtail Jameis.
Okay.
Um, not a bad bike at all.
Yeah.
It was probably 100 mil front, quick release front weir, probably a double chainring up front.
Hi.
Um, so
That's awesome. Wow. And you were able to qualify on like the downhill bike at
Tahoe Trail, yeah. So I think at that I just had like really good like road fitness. And that
mm,
was like I think that was yeah maybe like sophomore or junior year of college. I had just great like road fitness and didn't have mountain bikes. I was like, hey, can I borrow? I asked one of my friends if I could borrow his mountain bike, and yeah, I didn't know the difference between cross country bike or downhill bike or enduro bike or all that sort of stuff. So yeah, here you go. I was like, oh, sick. It's like specialized whatever. And like, yeah, I'll try it. I have pictures of me like full like roadie spandex with like riding this like full downhill bike and
that's so
looking like
awesome.
a Jerry now, looking back at it, but yeah, I didn't care and I didn't know any better. So
Wow. That's amazing. So, unfinished business at Leadville. Talk to us, or do you think you're going to go back and do it again?
I don't know. Not this year. Um, and then I don't know, maybe it's one of those things where since I'm kind of shifting focus to Skimo, maybe it's like maybe it might not happen the next year or two, but maybe it's something I come back to later. I feel like Leadville is definitely a race where you don't necessarily need to be in your 20s to do well. I
Sure.
think those sort of endurance events, and that's kind of why I like them, is that they're really conducive to lifetime athletes or lifelong athletes. So yeah, not this year. One of the best Skimo racer in the U.S., John Gaston. Um, he lives in Aspen, I think, and he only does like one or two mountain bike races a year, and one of them is Leadville, and I think last year he finished like second or third.
Yeah.
So I think not to compare myself with John, but I could see myself potentially dwindling down my mountain bike career and maybe just doing like one or two big mountain bike races a year, and like Leadville could be one of them.
Yeah, that would be sweet. So, what would be what if you don't mind me asking, what would be like your goal with Leadville? Like what's your with when you say unfinished business, what is something like what do you want to do there?
It definitely it's not so much time or placement related because that's so there's nothing you can control about that, whether who shows up, how the weather is. It's more of like feeling like I
Mm,
had I nailed my pacing strategy, I nailed my nutrition, I like had, as good of a training leading up to it that I could, and just feeling very fulfilled with things going as good as they could have been within, my control.
okay. Yeah, that totally makes sense.
And if that means being 10th or if that means being 50th, that's fine,
Okay.
uh, because we're seeing a lot of those big races, whether it's Leadville or Unbound or even Crushing the Tusher. Like people like to compare times from year to year, but now with the rise in popularity of those off-road events, that's all basically irrelevant at this point.
Yeah, that is super interesting. I really like that perspective. Yeah, just nailing the feeling, nailing the day.
Totally. Yeah, because then that's like I would rather be super happy with my race, and if that means being six, I'd rather have that happen than feeling like I messed some stuff up and I didn't fuel right and then getting third. I would almost be happier getting the sixth place because at least I feel like cool, like I had this big goal, I worked really hard towards it. It was emotionally and physically challenging, and I got through it, and I can be happy with that. So the
Yeah.
result was just kind of a bonus.
Have you always had that mindset in racing?
I would say so. Yeah, I'd say so. I think it's definitely helped me try and nurture a healthy relationship with sports in general, not to be so result oriented. I feel like actually, to be honest, I feel like earlier in my career I was more result oriented because I thought that that's what mattered the most at the time, to be able to, whether it was working my way up, getting my category upgrades on the road, or trying to build some sort of race resume to apply for teams or sponsors and stuff like that. For sure, results do matter. I think once I sort of got to the elite level, I feel like at that point it was more like, okay, what I really like this. What can I do to keep doing this for the foreseeable future? And I feel like being so result driven burns people out really quickly, or it's easy for people to lose motivation if they don't feel like they're hitting their results all the time.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely I feel like since I've gotten home from my mission, um, I've had like a shift almost in this kind of like what you're talking about, where before I would be very result focused, but now I kind of am more process focused, and it just leads to a healthier relationship with racing.
Totally. And I think having that mindset is almost what allowed me to really dive into Skimo in the winter and not feel like I have to go down to St. George or Tucson and ride 30 hours a week during the winter,
Yeah, yeah.
because for sure you see that on Instagram or on Strava and you're like, oh man, like should I be riding my bike more? But from where I'm at now, and it's something that I try and encourage a lot of athletes out there is to, I'm a strong believer in, the happiness factor for me is way more powerful than the extra 5-10% physical gain,
Mm, yeah,
so if I can do some Skimo all winter, obviously it's still a great workout, it still keeps me like very active, but most importantly it keeps my mind really fresh, and I get really excited and motivated when mountain bike season comes around versus grinding all winter in the rain or on the trainer or having to take time off to go to down south. I feel by the time spring or summer comes around, I would just be fried mentally,
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And I think
So
for some people, they like that. They like moving down south. They like training all winter, and for them it works. But I'm with you, Laura. Yeah, this winter I barely touched my bike. I just toured almost every day, and it was awesome. I loved it.
I think there's definitely something to be said about the committed sort of training, because that is the way you see the most gains, whether you measure that with watts or an FTP or whatever. And that is the way to get better. Uh, Maybe it's because I've been doing this long enough now that I feel like it's not so much about getting better. It's just about now being like consistently good and not getting injured, not getting sick, or not losing motivation. Those three factors can make or break my season much more than if I add 50 watts to my FTP,
Sure.
Because
Yeah.
if you lose motivation mid spring, you're gonna have a tough summer. If you start too early and you do a race and you break your collarbone, that's also a pretty big setback. If you train too hard and you get the flu or something, that's a big setback as well.
Yeah. That is really interesting to consider all of those factors. It can be easy to get super laser focused on just increasing fitness. So I
And
think
also, like, when I feel like when people are laser focused, if they do encounter a setback, it's a huge blow because that's all they were doing. That's all they were working for, and that's a really tough setback to get over. Where what's been really nice with these double goals, if you will, in the year between winter and summer is that I could have a great winter, and if I have a terrible summer, that's fine. If I could have a terrible winter, and if I have a great summer, that's fine too. Ideally, I'd have great both.
yeah.
But I feel like diversifying yourself as an athlete just gives you more opportunities to find satisfaction um, in little things instead of really being stressed out, thinking, "Oh man, I put all this work in the winter, in the spring, and I didn't nail my A race." That's a lot of pressure for people. Um, so, that's also a big reason I encourage young athletes to go to college, get a degree, get something, find a job that you're somewhat passionate about, because it will actually make you, I think, a better endurance athlete to have that sort of balance instead of going all in, unless you're insanely talented and you can actually make a good living out of it. I think it's a big risk, and I think eventually it's just a safer and healthier thing to have these different sort of perspective and avenues that you can pull motivation from in case something goes bad.
Mm, yeah. I think that's super valid. Good perspective. Um, yeah, I like that you kind of split these seasons into winter and summer with two separate goals, I think you said. What
Yep.
are kind of like your biggest Skimo goals? Obviously, you've only been doing this for a couple of years. What are your hopes and dreams with Skimo?
That's a good question. Something that is different with Skimo compared to cycling, I guess, is that the World Championships only happen every other year.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
I was kind of surprised when I heard that too. I was like, wait, what doesn't make any sense?
Yeah.
But it's like a World Championship year or a Continental Championship year. They
Mm,
alternate every year. So this last winter, I was able to participate in the World Championships. This next winter, it'll be the North American Championships and then World Championships again.
interesting.
Um, I think some of my big goals. I mean, I think I would be lying if I don't mention Skimo being included in the Olympics for the first time in 2026. That's obviously kind of the forefront of most Skimo racers' mind to a certain
Yeah.
extent. Uh, this feels kind of funny. It's kind of the first time I sort of share this with people that I'm not super close with. But it's kind of that big scary goal of like we were talking earlier about mountain biking, of chasing the top of the sport. The mountain biking style that I do, there's no Olympics, but for Skimo there is Olympics, and that's like whoa, that's like a whole other level in terms of pressure and momentum building up towards something.
Yeah.
And being on the national team last year and being on it this year again for the 23-24 season, that's 2 years out from the Olympics. So, I on paper, I'm on the right track. So
Right.
I think next that's why I feel like I should focus on it next year, because I'm probably never gonna get that opportunity again to at least be in the running for some sort of Olympic selection. And as I was mentioning earlier about sort of finding satisfaction in results, I'm really excited to just have that opportunity to even pursue that, where even if I don't make the team, which is, honestly the most likely situation, because we may only have one or two male representative from the US. So it's gonna be super selective. And so, I'm like ready to know or to accept the fact that it's going to be really, really hard to actually make the team. But I feel pretty confident that I can find a lot of motivation and excitement in being in the equivalent of like Olympic trials, if you will. I think that's going to be a really cool sort of experience. It's really cool to be in a sport that's gaining a lot of momentum. I almost feel like it would be like if we were mountain biking in the early 90s or something, whatever, when the peak of mountain biking was. Like, and anytime I hear stories about it, like, I wish that was just so cool.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like for Skimo, that's the time is kind of right now where it's being introduced to a lot of people, and the Olympics obviously is just going to blow that even more. So yeah, it's just a cool time to be involved. I am 29, so I don't see myself doing high level endurance sports for too long. But I think next 3-4 years is kind of my almost like uh last window of like really getting the most out of myself. Uh, so I think that's why I'm pretty excited about Schemos, because it'll be cool to see where I can go.
Yeah, totally. And there's real potential there for you to go really far, which is super exciting.
Yeah, or it's just, I think just the fact that the potential is unknown is
Yeah,
cool. Or like I mentioned earlier, like with cycling, it's like I know I could make another World Championships team selection, but I know I'm not gonna, you know,
sure.
I know where my level is. Where for Skimo, every year I'm seeing progress. Everything's still new. I'm still learning a lot, and until I feel like I've somewhat plateaued, I get really excited about, keep trying really hard. So, the big long term goal is that sort of Olympic selection situation. We don't even know what that will look like, how we qualify, how we get points as a nation, how many people go. So it's still like a very loose thing. I'd say on a short term, it's, yeah, basically learning as much as I can, kind of refining the skills, refining the technique, feeling like I'm still progressing. Obviously, I would like to do well at the national championships next year. The continental championships would be cool to do. I'll probably go do some European World Cups next winter. So I don't really want to set myself goals there because it's just all going to be new. But kind of how we were talking about Leadville, just to feel like I'm ready and prepared. I'm not intimidated by the European race scene, and feel like I can be a competitor more so than a participant. That's always
Yeah.
good. Yeah, I think Schemo is interesting because I feel like it's still new enough in the U.S. and in general enough that in the world, I guess, that there's not necessarily like a very strong training uh, like concept, I guess, behind how to be the best schema racer out there. Where,
Mm.
like, if you Google 5K running training plan, you're gonna have hundreds and thousands of
Uh,
training plans. Same thing with like how to ride your first 100 miles. Like, there's all that science has been like tried and true to a certain extent. But for schema, it's still like people are still figuring out like, oh, is a trail running background good, or is a cycling background better, or cross country skiing backgrounds, like what?
Uh-huh.
It's just kind of this niche sport, and there hasn't been the sports science research done in it the same way it has been for other more mainstream sports like running, cycling, even cross country skiing. There's a lot of science and data behind that, but for Skimo, it's just very different. So which actually makes it like for me pretty fun to sort of figure out.
Yeah. Kind of your own little scientist.
Totally. And I feel like having had those almost 10 years of uh, bike racing experience and coaching, and then understanding of training concepts, is kind of trying to knowing what works well for me and trying to adapt that to this new sport and seeing if that works.
Mm. Yeah. No, that's fantastic. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the Skimo event that will be in the Olympics is the sprint event. Is that correct? And the team relay?
That's correct. Yeah, it's sprint and team relay. So not really what people would think of when they necessarily think of Skimo racing.
Right.
And there definitely was a lot of pretty upset Skimo racers out there who kind of publicly shared their disappointment of
Mm.
the decision of the Olympic Committee to do what they did. But you know, for me, it's like, well, it is what it is. It's not necessarily the discipline that favors me the most, but I feel like as soon as you accept that, that's when you can start working your way towards adapting towards that, instead of just being bummed about it and not doing anything. So
Sure. And the sprint event is like 3 minutes, right? It's quick.
yeah, it's 3 minutes, which is kind of crazy to think about because like doing a 3 minute interval on a bike feels like it can go by really quick.
Uh,
For to have the full ski race, that's running, transitioning to boot packing, ski running again, transitioning, skiing downhill, all that in 3 minutes. Like, oh man, that's that's gnarly.
yeah.
It
Have you
almost feels
done
like
sprint races already?
what's that?
Have you done sprint races already?
I have, yeah. So I did. I got on the podium at the Powder Keg, not this last year, but 2 years ago. So that's cool. And then I did a sprint race at the World Championships in Spain this past winter.
Okay.
Um, it actually really reminds me of like kind of like cyclocross racing a
Oh,
little
yeah.
bit because it's just sort of like it's so intense, but yet you have to stay cool minded and be able to be very sharp in terms of decision making to not mess up your transitions,
Mm,
even though you're at that point you're breathing out your eyeballs and you can't even see straight, and yet you still have to be very mentally astute. you know.
absolutely. So with the Olympics choosing this event, the sprint, how is that going to affect your training moving forward?
Yeah, so I'm actually still kind of figuring that out with my coach because it's still a couple of years out, so we still have time to work towards that. I definitely feel like it's gonna be. I feel like by nature I love long distance endurance, so it's quite the opposite to do a schema sprint race. But I think in my mind I kind of think of it that way, where if I do the endurance mountain biking that I already do in the summer, that's basically my base building. And then when fall comes around, I'll start transitioning to some trail running and some gym work. And then in the winter, it'll basically be like just a lot of intensity and not a ton of volume. And that's kind of in my mind, at least. And just talking with my coach, that's kind of how we're visualizing a little bit these sort of build ups for the schemo season, is to kind of basically reduce a lot of the endurance and volume that I would do on skis, do that earlier, and that kind of helps build my base to just stack a ton of intensity on the skis, and probably just a lot of gym work as well, just to build some strength and some explosivity.
Yeah, I mean that's got to be super important in a 3 minute event. Got to be
So,
strong.
usually, like for example, this past winter, I love just going out there and doing, 5 to 10K vert days,
Yeah.
and probably not going to be doing a whole ton of those next winter.
Uh,
Uh, and if it means I'm just skiing for, basically like 2 hours max with some sort of intervals, in the morning, and then I do some gym work in the evening, that's probably what's going to happen. I'm obviously still going to have at least 1 or 2 days a week where I can do some more fun, bigger days if I want to.
yeah.
It's not so. I don't want to sacrifice that much, or like we mentioned, like we talked earlier. Like I don't want to be unhappy in this pursuit.
Uh,
So I become unhappy, and then like, what's the point?
totally.
I do enjoy the sprint racing. I like the tactical aspect of it, and the technicality of it. And I think I can adapt well as a sprint specialist, because I think when I first started cycling, I just had really good VO2 and like 2 minute power.
Mhm.
And then I slowly started to kind of stop doing crit racing and stop doing cycross and more of the long distance stuff. But I feel like I can work my way back to that sort of like VO2 sprint type of stuff.
Yeah. And with the sprint race, you do it multiple times, right? There's like qualifier and then like they
Yeah.
break like how does that work?
Yeah, so it's a good question, because it's basically like the first it's basically like could be like 60 people, and everybody does a qualifying run, which is basically a time trial on the sprint course.
Okay.
And we're all separated by 20, 30 seconds or whatever. And then I think it's maybe like, I'm going to use a random number, maybe like the top 30, they move to the semifinals, and then you race with 5 other people. I think it's heats of 6 people, and out of the 6 people, I think the top three move on the next round.
Huh.
So it's so at first it's basically like time trials, and then it's heats until the finals, and only the top three or the top two people advance to the next
Okay.
round. It's a very, very, very different experience going from the time trial where it's just you just do your thing, versus now racing with 5 other people on a pretty narrow course that is also very technical. And now you have to start thinking strategically, because it is only 3 minutes, but the difference between going all out, and being just the like second or third fastest in your group just to make sure you qualify, but not spend too much energy, that adds up. So,
Right.
uh,
100%. Because you
I
want to save your energy for the most important race.
totally, but then you don't want to be at risk of not
Well,
going fast enough in the qualifying rounds, or,
uh,
and that's the thing too, which is exciting, I think, is that it only takes a tiny little mistake in the transition to go from second to fifth. So you think you could be saving energy, but if you mess up your last transition, or you drop your pole by accident, you have to pick it up again, or you take a little, that extra second to fold your skin and put it in your suit. That could be the difference between having tried to be sneaky and save energy to now it flipping back around, and now you don't make the
yeah,
selection.
yeah, totally. That's a careful line to walk right there. Hmm. Are you familiar with who Max Valverde is?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
That, that bug goes pro.
Yep, Dad Bod goes pro. So for the listeners who don't know, Max Valverde, he's what, like 40, 36,
Something like that. Yeah. I've never met him in person, but I've heard of him.
late 30s. He decided to basically retire and train full time to try to make the Olympics in 2026. Um, with your perspective, do you think that's possible?
What is possible
Making the Olympics?
for
Him.
Matt?
Yeah.
Uh, you know, Nothing's impossible. Yeah. Uh, I think I yeah, I guess I don't know Maxwell enough to be able to say if I think his pursuit of the Olympics is more important to him than
Mm,
actually making it. I
true.
My gut feeling is that he's just really excited about sharing his experience with people, more so than selfishly just working really hard by himself and not sharing the
Yeah.
experience. really trying his best to make the Olympics. Of course, he wants to make the team. Anybody who's just going to sacrifice this much time and effort, they
Sure.
want to make the team. But I would be very, very surprised if he's the one going in Milan in 2026. I think there's a lot of young talent out there that in the next 2 years they're going to be like, yeah, pretty pretty hard to beat, But injuries happen, people get sick,
Sure.
people burn out, people, life happens. So
A lot of variables that sometimes aren't in our control.
so there's something to be said about something like Max who just keeps chugging along, and eventually something good's going to happen out of it, whether it's his selection on the team or whether it's his personal fulfillment in his pursuit of it. He's going to have a good time regardless, I think. So
Yeah. What he's doing is pretty cool.
yeah,
The
cool.
advancement
Like I remember when he like kind of first started making his posts and sharing his story, and it was kind of sad to see a lot of people there was a lot of negative
Mm,
comments. I think the majority of it obviously was very positive, but usually the negative ones are the loudest comments that you read or hear about. Um, but I think he does a really great job of sharing with the average skier, even or the average person in the U.S., like what is Skimo, like, a
yeah.
lot, a lot of people don't know what Skimo really even is, and the people at the top of the sport in the U.S. don't, in my opinion, they don't really make an effort to grow the sport
Mm,
because they're already at the top and they like being there, so
uh,
they don't necessarily want to take some of their own time to you know grow the sport or educate people about it, or uh, which is kind of a bummer. So I think what Max is doing is awesome. I think hope I
yeah.
get he did a really cool fundraising campaign for us when we were at the World Championships, kind of matching donations and stuff like that. So I mean, I love his excitement about it. Uh, there is a part of me, I'm not gonna lie, that is a little um, what's the right word? Like, not so much concerned, but a little bummed that I guess the whole idea of influencer athletes, I guess, is not something that I'm very excited about. I guess
Okay. Yeah.
Uh, and to give you a different perspective on it, it's definitely something that made me not want to pursue gravel racing anymore.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
I think the only gravel race I've ever done was Crush and Tusher back in like, gosh, maybe 2017, maybe. And I did pretty well, and I was like, I loved that race. But then that was also kind of the beginning of the gravel influencer boom. And now I'm like, I just have no interest in going to these events where, yeah, just the influencer superstar stuff is just not really my cup of tea.
Yeah.
Uh, Good on them for finding for noticing an opportunity and making the most out of it. It's just not really what I'm willing to do, I guess. I'm kind of naturally a pretty introverted person, and I know a lot of endurance athletes are, and it's hard to see very talented, hardworking people who don't get opportunities um, because other athletes are putting in more work on the social media front side of things, which is a lot of work. But when it comes down to a sporting event, you would hope that you know talent rises to the top, which is just not true anymore, unfortunately. I think, or the new reality of being a professional athlete now is just very different than what it was 5, 10 years ago.
Sure. Yeah.
And I kind of say that because I feel like, yeah, Max is really good at doing his videos and reels and Instagram stories and TikTok, whatever. He's really good at doing it. He's obviously spending a lot of time and effort, like flying his drone and getting the shots and editing and doing that. So there's something to be said that that work should be compensated somehow. But
Mm.
to see, for example, him receiving a sponsorship for his Skimo stuff from backcountry compared to the national team struggling to find like a title sponsor.
Mm.
It's like, it's a
Yeah.
it's, a weird balance there. Or, but I totally get it. Like I work with a marketing team as my day job, and I see the value that Max brings. Not, it doesn't even, it's not even Max in particular, just people like influencers bring. Uh, I just don't know how long that's going to last for. Eventually, eventually things are going to change. And I think the best thing we can do if we want to grow sports in general in our country is to really focus on supporting juniors and helping them develop as much as we can. And, if they think they need to become social media personalities just to become a professional athletes, it's just kind of sad, I think.
Mm. Yeah, no, that's true. And you do see that a lot where professional cyclists take on the role of influencer as well. There's but there still are some, who don't even have social media but are phenomenal, which is super cool to see.
It is, yeah. And it's like, and I hope I don't come across as like, you know, too negative about like influencers or Max and like I hope I'm not coming to across too negative.
No, no.
Max, yeah, I just because I do think there's a lot of value, as I mentioned with Max, like of to be able to watch these short form videos that these influencers work with their sponsors, whether it's like Keegan's White Rim FKT or Payson's videos or all those kind of gravel pros, like what they do. It's fun to watch it on YouTube or Instagram and whatnot, and it kind of helps to grow the sport. Uh, but yeah, it's almost like your job now. It's not even like a professional cyclist. It's kind of a multimedia
Mm.
cyclist,
Yeah, yeah.
And even just, I guess that's maybe a broader question that I don't even know if we have time on this podcast, but like, what is a professional athlete? You know,
Mm.
because I know a lot of professional cyclists who they don't even race. They get paid more than most professional road racers in Europe. Does that make them lesser of a professional athlete? I don't think so, because they're getting, at the end of the day they're getting paid, and they're still riding bikes. Doesn't mean you have to be racing the Tour de France or be on a world tour team or be on a factory mountain bike team.
Yeah.
Uh, I think it is cool that there is like all these different ways to make a career out of it. Uh, I just think it's a weird time right now because a lot of it is really new and people are still figuring that out, basically.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That is that's a good take on it, kind of seeing both perspectives and sides for sure. Bringing up FKTs, that was something I wanted to ask you. Is that something, I know there's several Skimo FKTs that people go for. Is that something you ever see yourself doing or attempting, is going for FKTs
Yeah,
anywhere?
totally. I think again, I don't know why, but I feel like a lot of people like, I don't know if it's from a running or a rock climbing background. People are afraid to share their FKT ambitions.
Uh,
They almost keep projects secretive until they actually do them.
sure.
I feel like it's kind of silly. So I'm totally happy to share like uh, what I would like to do. A big one that I kind of had a big X on trying to do this spring was the Mount Rainier FKT.
Which someone just got, right?
Someone just got, and now like I had done all this like calculations. Like I think the old record is doable. I feel like if I have a really good day, the old record is it's at least it's I can like mentally imagine myself doing it.
Right.
Now the new record is like, oh man, it would be a lot more things would really have to go really, really,
Okay.
you know.
Just Jason Duray had it before, is that correct?
Yeah, I think Jason and Tom Goth had it.
Okay.
And that was legendary. I was like, man, two like Salt Lake legends in the Skimo
Totally.
world, and Mount Rainier is like this legendary, volcano, and I feel like that was probably the most, yeah. Uh, I think it's the equivalent of like the White Rim for me, you know.
Sure. Yeah, totally.
It's like the mountain bike FKT, or it was like 2 3 years ago when the pandemic hit. It's kind of the one everybody wanted to get. And yeah, this new record is like, oof, that's a little dicey now, and it's to the point where on like mountain biking, I feel like Skimo FKTs, there's a way bigger risk
Hmm.
factor involved, um, because you're not just going uphill, you're going uphill and downhill. So if you're like 2 minutes back and you're trying to make 2 minutes on a 20-minute descent
Yep.
with crevasses and other parties going up by hiking and camping. It's almost to the point now where I feel like it's, uh, yeah, I mean, I hate to say it, but like almost like borderline irresponsible to like be
Uh,
chasing these FKTs, at least when it's like, um, full season, or the public's out there. It's kind of like going for a Strava KOM when at 5 p.m. on the shoreline. It's like,
uh-huh.
you can
Yeah.
try, but it's like you're gonna piss off a lot of people.
Uh-huh.
Like if it's like early season or really early in the morning, then I think it's fine.
Right.
But yeah, the big like big mountains are nothing to take lightly. So there's a fine line between feeling like you have the fitness to do it, and then feeling like you not only have the skills to match your fitness, but also have the mental clarity of being able to objectively like do some risk assessment while you're mid effort, because and unfortunately people are eventually gonna die from it.
Yes,
You
when
know,
you're at 13,000 feet and at 180 beats per minute, like you're not thinking very well. That's a hard place to still
and
make those kinds of decisions.
for a lot of people, just summiting Mount Rainier once is like the peak of their mountaineering
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
And to think that we can just like literally jog up there in like spandex and schema gear is pretty silly, but
Uh,
I do think it's fascinating. I think I do want to kind of share that it's, I just hope people can, I don't know, just like take it maybe more seriously than it might appear, because even like here in our area, like it seems like every season one or two people die from doing the whirl. It seems like like people fall trying to scramble these
right.
sort of,
Yeah.
it's easy to think, oh, when so and so did it in X hours, like that's crazy fast, like it can't be that hard, but no, it is pretty hard. you know
Yeah. And
and
dangerous.
and very dangerous. I always love traveling light and fast. That's kind of my favorite mode of transportation, of moving in the mountains. But it can be scary, it can be dangerous, and it's not like being on a mountain bike or trail running. There's a lot of steeper terrain, weather, temperature changes. Yeah, just a lot more factors.
And a lot less people too. Like if
Right.
something just goes south, there's like if you're mountain biking and crash pretty bad, chances are someone will come across you pretty soon. But when you're in
Right.
the backcountry, you could be alone for a long time.
And it's I think it's not fair to assume that you can be rescued, by others.
Yep.
And that's a very hard thing to kind of try and understand, and how selfish that can be to your friends and family, or even other people on the mountain who are just trying to have a good time chilling in Mount Rainier. Like they don't want to deal with hearing about some kid who crashed, slid, and died. It's like
Totally.
no one wants to hear that.
Yeah. Mm. So, with all of that in mind, is it something that you think you'll go for eventually?
Mount Rainier or FKT in general?
Mount Rainier.
Uh, I mean, I would like to do it. I've done it. I did it once. It wasn't. I did it once, maybe like 2 years ago.
Okay.
That was like a big day and big adventure for us, and we weren't necessarily trying to go fast. It was just kind of we were trying to do it in a day. So I would like to go again and do it, and maybe not like full throttle, but just at a like high tempo the whole day type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Feel pretty comfortable about doing that, and kind of I'd be curious to do that, see where my time stacks, and then maybe that can help me kind of give an idea of what's doable, what's not
Sure. Yeah,
doable.
yeah, yeah. No, I think that would be wise. Kind of give yourself a little bit of a checkpoint, see if it's something that's in the cards.
There's a lot of really cool, like I think that's what's cool about winter FKTs is that you're not necessarily restricted to a summer trail
Mm.
or road, so it's you can be a lot more creative with how you move through the mountains. And um, I think winter FKTs become really interesting too when it's not just one ascent and descent, but kind of a link up of ridges.
Oh,
You know, that it can be very long, but I think that's cool too because I think it the longer the distance in a weird way, I think it almost reduces the risk factor
oh, interesting.
because on one hand it's a lot more exhausting, it's a lot longer time, but you're also moving a little, you're not as quick and your heart rate's not through the roof the whole time.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I don't have plans like this year for any of them, and probably not next year with kind of the sprint focus. But
Yeah.
I love following it. I love looking at it on Strava. I love looking at it on the FKT website or hearing about it. It's always pretty impressive, to hear what people are able to do and how quickly they're able to move in the mountains like that.
Yeah. It's mind blowing. It's pretty, yeah, really cool to see. Um, let's maybe wrap up. I would love to hear your story. I think I saw on Strava last winter, maybe when you did like the Ogden Ridge line, something skiing. It was like 18,000 feet of climbing, 30 miles or something like that.
That was a really cool day. For anyone who's been in Ogden, it's basically like all the mountains you can see in Ogden, which was kind of the inspiration behind it. It was like, man, like when you're downtown Ogden and you look at the landscape, it's like it's all you can see. And I was like, I've skied there and I've skied there, but like it'd be pretty cool to be able to ski the whole thing in one day. Um, so for people who are familiar with Ogden, we started at basically the Malin's trailhead, skied or skinned and hiked all the way to the backside of Snow Basin
Mm.
Resort. Dropped into Snow Basin. We had to put skis on pack and sneakers on, and we had to actually like walk almost like a mile, I think, to the Lewis Peak trailhead, then skin all the way up. Kind of traverse by Lewis Peak, drop down to the North Ogden Divide. At that point, we were already like it was three of us. At that point, we were pretty smoked already because that was basically 2/3 of the way. Um, and the skiing was horrendous. It was like it was yeah 2 winters ago, so it was just a bad winter. Not a ton of snow. On the snow, it was like just super crusty. It was punchy. It was like terrible downhill skiing, especially on Skimo gear.
Yeah.
We got to the bottom of the divide and we were just smoked. One of our friends bailed there, and then my friend Colby and I finished the skin all the way up to the Ben Lomond Ridgeline. Yeah, and at that point it was almost getting dark. I'm like, oh man, one last downhill, but it's going to be a painful one because legs are toast, mentally we're drained. It's getting dark. We're trying to figure out how to put headlamps on.
How many like hours, elevation, miles in are you at this point?
So the whole thing was like 12 hours.
Okay.
Uh, but it's in the winter, so I think we started at 6 a.m. and it was dark, and we finished at 6 p.m., which is it's also dark in the winter.
Yeah.
So I feel like 12 hours in the winter feels like a much longer 12 hours than it would if it was spring or
True.
summer. Uh, and I think it's just I don't think any of us had spent 12 hours in ski boots like that before. Especially like going up and going down, you really kind of like your foot shifts a lot in your boot in weird ways that you didn't necessarily imagine. So I think we did one like sock change, put dry socks on, and that helped a little bit. But I was still getting some pretty gnarly blisters by the last descent.
Holy cow.
It's funny to think about it now because it's actually something that I think most people don't necessarily think of when they think of Skimo, but I feel like the most painful parts are the downhill.
Mm.
So a lot of people think, oh, the uphill is like so hard. You guys are kind of like running and going really hard, but it's if anything like downhill is the hardest part because you're full of lactic acid and your legs are tired, and yet you still have to try and and go down over that crashing.
That is hard. Yep. And it's not like you get a nice rest at the top. You know, you're transitioning and
Yeah.
down you go. So that's intense. Holy cow. Um, Audrey, are there any other last thoughts? Anything else you'd want to share with
Um,
viewers?
I'm just curious if you think you'll do some Skimo next year because I know we talked a little bit about it over this
Yeah.
one. I know you've been touring a lot. So do you have any plans there? Or?
Yeah, I think I'll definitely do the powder keg next year. I was just late registering this year, and I didn't realize that they would cut off registration. So I'll register early next year for that, and then probably just a few of the Tuesday night races. So I'll dip my toes in the water this year, I think. See how it goes. So it'll be fun.
You got any mountain bike racing this year?
Yep. So I'm going to Missoula next week, and then I'll race Silver Hollow. And then I'm doing the Crusher,
Nice.
and then basically about a month after that, the collegiate stuff will start. So I'll
That's
finish out with that.
collegiate mountain biking.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah, should be a fun season. Or do you have any mountain bike races planned?
I do. I'm actually I have a pretty big one coming up in like 2 weeks.
Okay.
I'm going to Colombia,
Oh wow.
the Pan American Marathon Championships.
Oh no way. That's
So
sweet.
yeah,
That's
I'm
you
really
guys
excited about
USA
that.
then, or who are you going down with? Who are you going with?
So I'm flying with a friend slash mechanic here, and then there's one girl that's going to be racing for Team USA from the East Coast. Her name's Abigail Snyder. Yeah,
Nice.
I haven't met her yet, but it's just the two of us kind of representing the US there.
Sweet.
So that should be cool. Never been down there. High altitude, which I like.
Okay. Yeah.
A bit of climbing, which I like. So we'll see.
Nice. Awesome. Good for you. So that's 2 weeks you said?
Yeah, June 18th, I think.
Okay. Well, best of luck with that. It'll be exciting.
I'll keep you posted.
Yeah, please do. Please, yeah, I'll be on the lookout on Strava, social media, see what goes down. So that'll be good. So, yeah, thanks so much for coming on, Jules. It was good catching up and hearing all of your great stories.
So, Jay, yeah, talk soon.
Okay, sounds good. Good luck.